So yes, Kimbra. All right, we're in lesson number 12 of Course of Miracles today, or lesson 13. What happened? I should, yeah, it's lesson 13. No, it's lesson 13. Yes. I changed that slide. This was so weird, and that I didn't grab it. So here's what we've covered so far. I'm not going to go through them all because now that we're 13 in, it's going to take too much time. Just know that the website is updated, kwpivot2020.com, and they're all there with the lessons printed right underneath for the videos. So it's there for you. I do want to go through the last few, though. So lesson 7 was I see only the past. Lesson 8 was my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. So we're starting to see things build on each other as we moved into that week last week, where all of our context for everything we give meaning to typically sits from or always sits from our past. And so the whole idea is if we can work to let that go, it gives us great possibilities for miracles to show up in our present and in our future. And then we talked about don't understand anything I see. Then my thoughts do not mean anything. This was kind of the start of this conversation. Yesterday it was my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. The homework or lesson overnight yesterday was I'm upset because I see a meaningless world. So let's talk about that for a moment. What happened for you as you worked on that exercise around I am upset because I see a meaningless world? And we talked about it being give a label to whatever that upset was. So was it anger? Was it fear? What was that? And then how did the exercise play out for you? So who's got anything they'd like to share from that respect? So one of the things that keeps sticking in my head, and I've said it a couple times because it is so prevalent for me, is that I go back to that line from Shakespeare, and it was that Shakespeare wrote from Hamlet, and that was, nothing is either good nor bad. Our thinking makes it so. And it's kind of that idea is that when we give meaning to things, then it gives it a good or a bad label. And we asked you to kind of think about it from whatever you saw, it doesn't have meaning. And if it was good or bad, don't even filter from that because there is no good or bad. It's just the meaning you give it. And once I give it a meaning, then it's where the emotion shows up. Right, and I also think about it in the Eastern philosophies of yin and yang. Right, in everything good there is bad, and in everything bad there is good. It's a matter of what we choose to focus on or put our focus to. So even in coronavirus, this COVID-19, whatever's happening in this world right now, in everything there's good that can be found. Or you could focus on the bad all the time. It's just a matter of where you choose to do that. From a miracles perspective, it's where we're looking towards the future. If we stop looking at meaning, then the future opens up. Now, today's lesson, this is an interesting one, and this is one of, this starts getting into some really interesting pieces, I believe, from the last time I did this. The lesson is a meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. Now you're going, wait a minute, Darren, how can that be? You just talked about don't give meaning to things. Well, when there's a meaningless world, it can engender fear. Let me talk about what I mean in this. It says today's idea is really another form of the preceding one, which was that idea that I am upset because I see a meaningless world, except that it is more specific as to the emotion aroused, right? So we're giving it a label of fear. Actually, a meaningless world is impossible. A meaningless world is impossible. Well, what do you mean? A meaningless world is impossible. I've took a couple notes from here. I'm going to put on the screen for you. Nothing without meaning exists. So those two lines I think are really powerful. A meaningless world is impossible. Nothing without meaning exists. However, it does not follow that you will not think you perceive something that has no meaning. I know this gets a little confusing. On the contrary, you will be particularly likely to think you do perceive it. So just bear with me for a moment. I'll get a little deeper in this. It might start coming together. Recognition of meaningless arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. That's a key line. So let me say that again. Recognition of meaningless arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. It represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other as to whose meaning is to be written in the empty space of that meaningless provides. So this is where when I first read this, prepping for this, I kept thinking about the word ego, ego, ego. I've heard that said that that's an acronym for a number of things. The one that sits with me for this though is edging God out. Ego, edging God out, pushing him out, right? So being separated. That's a separated one. The ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality. So when we let our ego take over, that's when we find ourselves in a meaningless world with fear being engendered in us. So ego has got to step in. So it goes on to say, on this alone it is correct. So when it steps in, because there's fear, that's ego taking over. It is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaningless and accept it without fear. So when it's empty and meaningless, just accept it without fear. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with images that do not exist. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you who equate yourself with the ego, edging God out. Now, this exercise today, which should be done about 3 or 4 times, not more than a minute at each time, so similar to the other exercises we've done, 3 or 4 times, not more than a minute each time, is to be done in the following ways, similar to the preceding ones. We want you to start with your eyes closed. With your eyes closed, and repeat the idea from today's lesson, which is a meaningless world engenders fear. So with your eyes closed, each time you're going to practice this, a meaningless world engenders fear. And then open your eyes and look about you slowly, saying, I am looking at a meaningless world. So we start with our eyes closed and we say a meaningless world engenders fear. And then when we're ready, we open our eyes and gaze about slowly, saying, I am looking at a meaningless world. Repeat that statement to yourself as you look about, and then close your eyes and conclude by saying, a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. That's the lesson today. So there's 3 parts to it. I'm going to go back because I want to make sure you can jot this down in your notes. So that's why I built the slides for this one. So again, 3 to 4 times today, between now and tomorrow. Close your eyes, repeat the idea that a meaningless world engenders fear, and then open your eyes and look around slowly and say, I am looking at a meaningless world. And just as you gaze upon whatever you see, I'm looking at a meaningless world. And then we're going to wrap it up by saying, with your eyes closed again, a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. That's ego. That's ego. And that's such a powerful piece of this. I'm going to go back. I'll filter back through the slides a couple times if you want to get all that written down as far as the exercise. Couple things from the manuscript around this about ego, though, and I was hopeful that I'd have a little bit of time to do this, because I think this is an interesting study from a standpoint of really being able to allow miracles in your life. It says the Bible says that you should go with a brother twice as far as he asks. It certainly does not suggest that you set him back on his journey. Devotion to a brother cannot set you back either. It can lead only to mutual progress. The result of genuine devotion is inspiration. A word which is properly understood is the opposite of fatigue. To be fatigued is to be dispirited, but to be inspired is to be in the spirit. In fact, the Greek basis of the word inspired is inspiratu, which is with spirit. Inspiratu. So to be fatigued is to be egocentric So let an ego be the basis of who you are and how you operate, is to be dispirited. But to be self-centered in the right sense is to be inspired or in the spirit. So, and I think it's important to understand when we say self-centered, a lot of times we use that in the incorrect way. Self-centered is to be inspired or in the spirit. The truly inspired are enlightened and cannot abide in darkness. You can speak from the spirit or from the ego as you choose. If you speak from spirit, you have chosen to quote, be still and know that I am God. These words are inspired because they reflect knowledge. If you speak from ego, you are disclaiming knowledge instead of affirming it, and they are indeed in vain. So that's where ego starts showing up, is where we start pushing God away. So the ego may desire them, but spirit cannot embark on them because it is forever unwilling to depart from its foundation. Now, where we start getting into the manuscripts deeper, it starts talking about how we are all connected. And this is where I think this Course in Miracles is such a wonderful tie-in to what we did when we were looking at power versus force, and the whole idea that everything is connected. We are all connected. That's that study of kinestheology, and also the idea of quantum physics, that we all are connected. And so when ego is there, there's a lack, you can't be connected because it's you over others. It's you before others. And I think that's the kind of the idea in this lesson today. And we're going to start breaking it down even further, because tomorrow we even go deeper around ego, and I'll go a little further in the manuscript. So I thank you, Kimbra had put over in the text box. You just read that. That's awesome. Perspiration and inspiration, yes. You talked to Geoff Pedretti yesterday about a possible deal. Is that what that was? Let's see. Kathy Schmidt. Oh, sorry, Kimber. I saw the K, and it was Kat. So awesome, Kat. Yeah. So Kathy Schmidt, who does works up kind of northwest of us. So awesome. Yeah, that's great. So you may want to check the chat box. So I'm going to just take this slide off. I'm going to go back. Let me go back one more slide, though, just so you can see this one last time if you wanted to get a copy of that. So it's eyes closed, repeat the idea, meaningless world engenders fear. Eyes open, slowly gaze around, saying, I'm looking at a meaningless world. When you're done with about a minute of that, close your eyes and say, a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. When ego is there, that's the competition. So the goal is to eliminate ego and just be in the spirit. Inspired is in the spirit. And see what happens for you as you work through this. Now, like the other exercises, if you find it difficult to avoid resistance as you go through this, conclude with that statement and just end. So don't go back and do it again. Whatever form such resistance shows up, like something that makes you feel uneasy, remind yourself that you're really afraid of such a thought because of the vengeance of the enemy, meaning that's you thinking you can't let that space be vacant, if you will. You are not expected to believe this statement at this point of a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. You're not expected to believe the statement at this point, and will probably dismiss it as just preposterous, right? You'll say, I can't say that. If that happens, if you come up with any resistance, note carefully any sign of overt or covert fear which it may arouse. So what really is stirring the bottom of the pool and getting this to show up for you? This is our first attempt at stating an explicit cause and effect relationship of a kind which you are very inexperienced in recognizing unless you've done this before. So do not dwell on the concluding statement. So if that gets you kind of uneasy, don't dwell on it. Try not even to think of it except during the practice periods, and that will suffice in the present. So, and that is, when you end this exercise, you go to this last statement of I'm a meaningless world engenders fear because I am in competition with God. If it brings up anything emotionally for you, just be with it. It is what it is. And for some it will, and that's okay. That's just this course doing what it does. Any questions, thoughts, or comments? We've got about 2 minutes. For that, I'm going to take the stop share off. This starts getting a little deeper as we go into it. And remember, there's 365 of these, And the first two-thirds is really kind of helping us manage and get rid of the stuff that's we hang on to. I always call it our baggage from the past. Some of us like to carry a lot of it around. It's really freeing when we let it go. So that's really what this is all about. So stay in it. If you get confused, don't worry about it. You're perfect in that. And I know that's odd because a lot of us are like, no, I've got to feel, I got to know. That's part of this process. So any questions, thoughts, or comments? All right, guys. Well, here's what I just say. Thank you for being with me. I know this is getting into some deep stuff. Stay in it. It's great work when you stay through it. And we will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. for number 14. So thanks again. Have an awesome day, everybody.
Thanks, Darren.
Good to see you all.